And let's talk to our friend Richard in the UK about having these conversations with theists. Richard, what's on your mind?
Hi, you might know me. I am a host of Talk Heathen,
Mhm.
and
Never heard of
I
you.
think, I think, I think it's a good having you two on is a great opportunity, especially for people like me who don't have your backgrounds, because I talk to, as you know, a lot of people who are theists and who have beliefs in supernatural claims, and I do that on the ACA TikTok, and I do it on these shows, and on Twitter, and many, many other places. But I want to kind of pick your two's brains because you two are professionals in your fields, and I want to know how to better engage compassionately with theists when we're talking to them, or people who have supernatural beliefs, so it doesn't turn into a kind of he said, she said, all-out war.
Yeah, I mean that really is the question, right? Like that's what we're here to talk heathen about every week. And I don't know that there is a right way or a wrong way to do it, but I do think that it's valuable to focus on listening more than anything else. Anytime somebody is involved in a discussion about religion or moral philosophy, you can basically assume 99 times out of 100 they have no interest in changing their beliefs. They're eager to change your beliefs. And so you have to be willing to come alongside people a little bit and kind of put up with a little bit of grandstanding, a little bit of lecturing, because people aren't going to want to hear you out until they have very much felt heard themselves. You may not have space for that, and that's okay. That's why these discussions are not necessarily a moral obligation all day, every day. Ben, how does that land for you?
Yeah, I feel the same way in that, like on the one hand, yeah, you want to talk compassionately with people. You want to be a good listener as much as you're able to tolerate, but it is important to set up boundaries. And it's okay to tell your family, like, hey, I don't really want to discuss this issue with you right now. Um, I know for me, this was something that I had to set up, and I've been happier with my family not discussing religion with them at all, because I
Sure.
know, especially with them, even if we were to talk about it, they're not going to change their beliefs because of me. There's too much family kind of competition and bias there. Like oftentimes your family doesn't want to listen to, especially parents, oftentimes don't want to listen to their children. So if somebody were to uh, help them on the road to deconstruction and deconversion, it would not be me. And I need to understand that maybe it's better to save the relationship and put up that boundary and say, hey, like I value you as people. I want you to be in my life. I want to be in your life. But in order to do that, I think we both need to not talk about this particular issue, and that
Hmm.
is a boundary on both sides. Because something else, like I want to bring up, I know a lot of uh, atheists will express to their family, like, hey, I don't want you to evangelize to me, but then they'll continue making sky daddy jokes and all that stuff around
Sure.
their theistic family. And I think that's problematic. I think if you're going to set up a boundary and expect somebody else to respect your boundaries, you need to equally respect theirs. So if you're going to say, please stop evangelizing to me, then you should also respectfully not bring up the issue to them. Because that's kind
Yeah.
of
And again,
unfair.
remembering that idea of infinity, it's
Mhm.
not to say that just because you have a God belief and I don't, that you are somehow more passionate about these issues than I am. I mean, again, like I'm here having these conversations on a volunteer basis because I'm so driven by these things. But I also have to remember, if I'm talking to a family member or anybody else, that while I am comfortable saying, well, I want to try and make the world a better place, I want to try and talk to you about how to make the world a better place, I'm having this conversation with you because I think it will help. The person that you're talking to theoretically should be able to engage on well, what is best and how do we know and what makes sense? But they're having to do so with kind of a like eternal gun to their head. You know, if you win the debate, if they come around to your way of thinking, then that means that they are suffering an incredible psychological loss, and they may not be prepared to do that. And you know what? That has to be okay too.
Well, and also remembering that maybe you don't need to start off trying to deconvert them of their god belief. Like maybe you can start with something that is common between you, like figure out like, hey, we both want to help people, we both want humanity to thrive, and we want uh like there's a lot of things that I think we overlap with what we want, but we're taking different routes to get there, and we disagree
Right.
on that. But before going directly to kind of the root of uh, all of their beliefs, uh, because that's often very threatening if you just target the big thing right away. Like maybe even bringing up things like LGBTQ rights, it might be one that you start with. Starting with things like what role does charity have? Like talking about religion and charity, or things that like maybe you can get more on the same page of like, hey, we both want to help humanity, and maybe we can discuss like, hey, here's why I think we need to uh, have more respect for LGBT people, and even having those discussions might chip away at the blocks a little bit,
Hmm.
and say, "Oh, well," because I mean that's kind of how it happened for me. Like, um, starting a biology degree, but then also meeting queer people was a big hit to my belief system, and ultimately at the end had me deconvert. But initially, it was like, "Oh no, well, but maybe I can be a believer and think that gay people are okay." Like, well, maybe I could even if it's not that far, even if they still want to like disagree with the LGBTQ lifestyle, like maybe the first step is like, oh yeah, I'm a believer, but maybe I can use she her pronouns with my friend. Like maybe that's not going to impact my life a whole lot to extend that olive branch. Like maybe having some of those smaller conversations uh can lead to more beneficial conversations in the long run, but we don't always need to start off with the heavy hitter questions right off the bat.
Mm-hmm. How does all that land with you, Richard?
Yeah, thanks for that. It's really interesting, and just to kind of follow up on that, do you think there are degrees to which we should kind of employ compassion when talking to different theists? For example, people in the workplace versus people at home versus complete strangers on the internet.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't mean to just keep waving my hands and saying like, well, everything is relative, but yeah, it is a nuanced and difficult line to draw, and I think it really just needs to come back to a place of seeing people where they are. You know, if you operate from the assumption, from the belief that everybody that you are talking to has valid thoughts, maybe not rational thoughts, maybe not beliefs that actually make sense when you graph them out or start to poke at them, but they are all beliefs that a person could believe if that person had had the lifestyle, the experiences, the genetic code, the everything else that the person you're speaking to has. To not just put yourself in their shoes in some sort of like arbitrary, oh, well, if I could imagine myself and act like them for a day, but in a sincere and meaningful understanding of, well, yeah, if I had been told that by a preacher, by my family, by my community all of my life, if I had been hurt in these specific ways, if I had these particular experiences, all of that would lead me to be saying some of the same stupid things this person is saying. And it doesn't mean that they're stupid. And we can be kind about whether we, no matter how we understand them, recognizing that where they're coming from makes sense. And whether that is online or in person, just trying to connect with that humanity and maybe not pushing the envelope in ways that aren't going to actually benefit anybody.
I
Yeah, thank
co-sign
you for
all
that.
of
I
that.
appreciate that. I think obviously I've been talking to people on these subjects for a long time, and it's great to kind of pick your two's brains. I know we kind of, especially myself and Ben, talk behind the scenes quite a lot, but it's great just to have these conversations and kind of get that out to a wider audience, and pick your specialities, and have that way. Even me, as someone who talks to people like this a lot, I can learn so much from listening to other people. So I really do appreciate your advice.
Yeah, well, so before I let you go, Richard, I am interested to hear sort of your take on that earlier question, or maybe to just acknowledge with the conversations that you're having, and especially this being a religious holiday that can be really upsetting and triggering for a lot of folks. Where do you draw that line? What is your sense of virtue versus obligation, or knowing when, like writing this person a paragraph to compassionately and patiently explain something to them is just not fucking worth it for me today? How do you come to that conclusion for yourself?
I try to be compassionate. I do have a short temper sometimes. I do try and be compassionate as much as possible with people. I tend to try and let people take the lead if I can, and respond in kind. So if somebody's wanting open and honest and genuine conversation, I will listen. And if somebody kind of wants to come in all guns blazing, then I will take that as my cue to respond like for like. So, but I do try to lead in compassionately, if at all possible, if I can.
Yeah, I mean, that's a muscle that gets sore and bruised just like any other. So I appreciate everything that you're doing with this, and thank you so much for calling in.